welcome to this edition of Wineskins. I'm Father Jim Korda. Wineskins is a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and the sacred scriptures, along with a variety of issues and topics, all from a Catholic perspective. Wineskins is brought to you through the annual Diocesan Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our program today, I will interview Father William Wainio. We will also hear more information on St. Peter Damian, and today, as the Church celebrates a sixth Sunday in Ordinary Time, we will get a deeper insight into those particular Sunday readings. That and more on Wineskins. Catholic Charities is an important part of the life of the Church and her members. Now we will hear an important issue from Rick Squires. With me now is Rick Squires, who is the Executive Director of Catholic Charities for both Portage and Stark counties. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Father. Thank you for having me.
You know, it's always nice to have someone from Catholic Charities to be with us, to enlighten us and to tell us of the wonderful things that are happening through Catholic Charities. One of the items that we don't always talk about is that the basis for all that Catholic Charities does is based on Catholic social teaching. Why is that important to have that as the basis for all that you do?
Well, Father, I think as a church we recognize the value of the human person. We are all people that are in communion with each other, and we need to recognize how we live our Christianity, how we live our Catholicism, and that is deeply seated in what we do for others. At Catholic Charities, the life and dignity of the human person is really kind of at the center of how we serve and why we serve. When we have people come to us, doesn't matter if they're Catholic or not, we recognize them as being created in the image of the divine. And if somebody is created in the image of God, we should certainly reverence them in the same way and support them in their times of need. When I talk to our staff, or even when I'm interviewing people to be staff members, that's a central portion of our conversation, because they need to understand why we operate, why we serve the way we do, and that is really because everybody deserves the dignity that we hope to give them on a daily basis.
You know, as you were talking, one thing that comes to mind is that we don't often do that with people in need. You know, we look at someone who is homeless, or someone who is unemployed, or someone who is coming to the food bank all the time as people who are either lazy or they don't want to work, or we don't know exactly what they're going through. And so once we understand what their trouble or their need is, and understanding basically that they are a child of God and a human being, then we could best understand this is why we serve the people that we serve. And so I think that you're right, that's fundamental. But what can we, as people who are blessed, do to help those that are not as blessed as we are?
And I think that comes into our daily interactions with everybody, and not just the support that we get from wonderful people in parishes and outside, but really your interactions with everybody that you have is taking some of that judgment. And that's one of the hardest things that we do as staff, is taking the judgment piece and putting it aside and look at the individual and say, what can we do for this individual? Regardless of the decisions, regardless of who they appear to be on the outside, and put those aside and then really treat them in a way that will benefit them. That's our desire. A tremendously difficult thing to do when you've got people that come in, and sometimes they're not the easiest people to deal with. Sometimes they're abusive. We deal with that. But we take a step back and say, okay, I don't want to know what they've been through in their lives. I don't need to know that. The origin of who they are is a child of God, to your point. And that's the hardest thing to do. But the thing I think we're called to do, and I think that's what I hope that Catholic Charities offers, that as an example to Catholics that are in the pews, of saying, regardless of what this person is on the street, they are a child of God, and they deserve respect. And I see that on a regular basis from all the wonderful volunteers that come and help us in our offices. Judgment is put aside. And I think the more we do that, I think the better we are as people. And I think that speaks to Pope Francis's encyclical on Heart of Jesus Christ, is when we serve from the heart, we're serving from a place that is not a place of judgment. That, I think, is one of the most rewarding things we can do as people.
Sure. And I think one of the things is that we're not there to necessarily hand things out. We're there to lend the hand of the Lord. And so how do we do that? Well, we do it in a number of different ways, but it's always based on what the Lord has taught us and what our Catholic social teaching is all about, in looking at people and one another as a child of God, not necessarily as someone who needs to be fed because they're poor and they're indigent or they're lazy, whatever it is.
Right.
So getting that mentality is really the beginning of it all.
You're absolutely right. When we talk to people on the phone, or we talk to them in person, it's that encounter with them that sometimes is the most important thing. It's not necessarily the material goods that we're giving, but the hope that we're giving in a kind voice, in an understanding or an acknowledgement that what they're going through is very difficult, and we feel for them in that way. It's really an empathy piece.
And what would you like to let the folks that are with us now know about how important it is and what they can do to better educate themselves on Catholic social teaching?
I'm going to say that Catholic social teachings is really boiled down into one thing, and that is the acknowledgement that each person that we see and that we encounter is truly created in the image of the divine, the same as we are. And I think that encounter is the education that goes much further than anything you could read in a book or any sermon you could listen to, anything else you could do. One-on-one conversation or interaction with somebody who isn't as gifted as we are, and encountering somebody in that means, I think, is the biggest educational plus that you could come across, is really kind of a better understanding of the human condition from every different direction.
Rick Squires, Executive Director for Catholic Charities at both Portage and Starr counties, thank you for your presence on the show today and highlighting the necessity of understanding that what we do is based on teachings that the Church has given to us through the Lord. And so we thank you for highlighting that for us, and we thank you for the work and the ministry that you do in both of those counties. And we thank the folks that work with you and for their volunteerism, for their dedication, and for their love of God's people.
Thank you, Father.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Korda. St. Peter Damian was an Italian Benedictine monk. To tell us more is Dennis Bivano. He is from St. John the 23rd Church in Niles.
This feast was placed in the liturgical calendar, and Peter Damian was declared a doctor of the Church only in 1828. Born in Ravenna, Italy, and after manifesting unusual intellectual gifts, he began to teach in the university at the age of 21. 7 years later, he retired to a life of solitude to live a penitential life. There he composed rules for hermits and was elected prior for his community. At various times he served as a papal legate in France and numerous places in Italy. In addition to his theological treatises, he is the author of the late Saint Romuald, founder of his community of hermits. As a peacemaker and reformer, Peter Damian was a forerunner of the reform instituted by Pope Gregory VII. He died on February 22, 1072, and his call was popular in the area of Ravenna and in his monastic order. In the Divine Comedy, Dante places St. Peter Damian in the seventh heaven among the contemplatives. In the first part of the opening prayer of the Mass, presents Peter Damian as a teacher and model of the Christian life. The second part urges us to imitate the saint by making Christ and the service of his church the first love of our lives. The first part refers to the masterly leadership of Peter Damian during a sad period in the church. In one of his works, he stated, "Monastic discipline is lax and far removed from its customary perfection. The majority of the clergy live mundane lives, and the laity fight and plunder one another." His denunciation of the vices of the day increased the hostility of his adversaries. Peter was coldly rebuffed by Pope Leo IX, who had capitulated to the very persons that Peter was denouncing. Today as well, we need persons who will follow the courageous example of Peter Damian and pass judgment onto the decadence of public morality. We must never compromise the gospel. The second point for our imitation is Peter Damian's dedicated service to the Church. Out of love for the Church, he has left his beloved solitude to travel extensively as a peacemaker in the name of the Pope. For Peter Damian, every Christian is a little church capable of realizing himself or herself the relationship of Christ to his church. St. Peter Damian exhorts us not to give in to bitterness and discouragement under the lashes of the heavenly discipline. We can summarize the life of this great saint in 3 phrases contained in the Office of Readings. Let the serenity of your spirit shine through your face. Let the joy of your mind burst forward. Let the words of thanks break from your lips. For Wineskins, I'm Dennis Bivano.
With me is Father William Wainio. Welcome to our show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Today we're talking about the sacrament of holy orders. And so you just come off being a deacon and now a priest. I'd like to take some steps back and talk about what led up to your ordination to the diaconate, first of all. And we're going to talk about the diaconate too. But let's give a little background into your journey into priesthood.
Sure. So, of course, discernment and seminary formation, big part of what led up to ordination as a deacon. I had completed 6 years in the seminary by the time I was ordained a deacon. In seminary formation, you cover everything from the deep roots of theology, topics in philosophy and how to think, how to argue, things like that, because it really does help you form then how to explain the mystery. And, you know, a lot of people look at the church and say, well, they don't know what they're talking about. Well, it's hard to explain a mystery. But in different classes on the Trinity and the Eucharist and liturgy, a whole wide variety of things, you really do learn how to become more intimate with that mystery and then how to explain it to others. So that was a big part leading up to it. And of course, in that, a lot of prayer and discernment. So talking with a formation advisor, talking with the spiritual director, what's going on in the day-to-day life? What do I feel God is calling me to do? How am I building upon the foundation that had been laid for years before entering the seminary? How am I building upon that to succeed? How am I changing? You know, you should never, I don't think any man should go into the seminary and come out the same person.
Right.
Formation didn't work at that point. That was a big deal of what led up to diaconate ordination, and, you know, it was a great blessing. I mean, I loved every minute of it. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad I'm on the other side of it now because I'm really ready to minister as a priest.
Sure. Well, I kind of look at the diaconate, and basically it's a year for transitional deacons primarily to have that diaconate experience. And I look upon it as being formed and informed, as you had mentioned. It's a time to be informed on the doctrines and the mysteries of the faith, to immerse yourself into the history of the church academically, but it's also a time to be formed through the Spirit into that order of diaconate and eventually priesthood. But it's also a fun time because you don't have those administrative responsibilities as you do now as a priest. And so it's a time to really enjoy ministry. What did you enjoy most about the diaconate?
Baptizing children. Just what a whirlwind. You know, I've always told people I want to be a priest because I want to bring the sacraments to God's people. And of course, a deacon has the great blessing to be able to witness marriages, baptize children and adults, bring communion to the sick, the homebound, visit the sick, visit the hospitals. But one of the best things was the first baptism I had, I'll always remember. And I've had about 8 or 9 as a deacon. I've been blessed that during my assignment, which was in downtown Canton at the Basilica of St. John the Baptist and St. Peter's in downtown Canton, we had a number of baptisms. And my pastor, Father Misbrenner, really helped by saying, well, you better take it. You know, it's a good experience. And it was. Every one of them was a good experience, from, you know, the baby that laughed the whole time and the baby that screamed and cried because they didn't know what was happening. But to be there with a family that has probably brought people to church that haven't been there in a while to witness this moment and to see the joy in the parents, godparents, grandparents' faces, really just heartwarming and really kind of amazing. You know, the Spirit working through you has now brought someone else into God's church. It's really a powerful
You know, it's interesting as you were talking, one thing that comes to mind is my first baptism as a deacon 46 years ago. I was at St. Paul's in North Canton. That was my diaconate assignment. And my first baptism were 10 babies.
Oh, my.
And of course, that was back then, 46 years ago. I was newly ordained deacon, really didn't have a clue of what was going on. And I remember all those babies cried, because when one starts crying, the other one's, it's a chain reaction. But for some reason, it kind of got me prepared for the noise and the cacophony that goes on sometimes at your big masses where there's a lot of children.
Yeah.
And so you kind of like could focus a little bit more because you're used to hearing that noise. And nowadays, unfortunately, in many of our churches, we don't have the noise of the little kids and the babies, which is really not a good thing, but it's an opportunity for us to cultivate young families. And I would imagine through baptism, through marriage preparation, through those sacraments, that we come in contact with young people. I would imagine you had a lot of contact with young people as a deacon. What were some of those experiences that helped you understand how important that was?
Oh, for sure. Being in downtown Canton was a great blessing. I got involved with our CCD programs, youth ministry. I helped with our confirmation class, prepare them for the sacrament of confirmation and the retreat. But also we started a young adult group, really working with the DRE there in Canton. She saw a need for this, and she was right. So we brought in a number of young adults, some just starting out in marriage, some raising children already, some waiting to bring their children into the world. And it's just a joy to be with them and hear their stories and be able to form relationships, because then they're asking you to baptize their children and come over for dinner. And, I agree with you. It really is sad today that we don't hear the pitter-patter of children in church. I would encourage parents, bring them to church. If they start crying, it's okay. That's another thing. Being up there and preaching, I've had a great experience and great practice with that, and the noise from the congregation, from the pews. It's all good. It shows, again, that our church is alive, and we need that.
What would you encourage young people who might be considering discerning about a vocation? What would you like to give them as some advice?
You have to pray. You have to have an open dialogue, an open conversation with God. If you don't have that, you'll never find the answers that you need. But with that also, you do need good, solid people you trust in your life to sit down and talk to. Maybe your parents, a sibling, a priest, a deacon, a sister, a friend, whoever it may be. Somebody that you trust to say, I really have this idea about priesthood, about religious life, and I don't know where to take it. Because just talking that out really answers some questions. So I would say prayer, and you got to be surrounded by people that you trust and that support you.
And it's basically a ministry of service, as priesthood really is a ministry of service. For more pertinent information and to listen to Wineskins, visit catholicecho.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
It's time for Patron Saints of the Diocese of Youngstown with your Bishop, David J. Bonner.
Our Lady of Hope refers to a Marian apparition to 6 children in the war-torn village of Pontmain, France, in 1871. Our Lady encouraged them to pray for protection, and 1 week later, the Franco-Prussian War ended. She is a patron saint of protection, especially during war and difficult circumstances, and patron of Our Lady of Hope Parish with 2 church locations in Orwell and Kinsman. Her feast day is January 17th. So happy feast day of Our Lady of Hope to our friends in Orwell and Kinsman. Our Lady of Hope, pray for us.
If you have a story idea for the Catholic Echo magazine, podcast, or website, send an email to catholicecho@youngstowndiocese.org. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Our song today is from the CD called Come You Who Labor. It is by Vince Ambrosetti.
through hunger or distress. Though all the world becomes your foe, should harm and danger fix their gaze on you or those you love, even unto death, do not be afraid. Do not be concerned. All you ask of me, I will provide in the darkest storm. I am at your side. For neither death nor life, the present nor the future, can separate us from the love of God that comes in Christ Jesus the Lord. Do not be afraid. Do not be concerned. All you ask of me, I will provide in the darkest storm. I am at your side. A time will come when others hate you and come to harm you because of me. Then I alone will be your stronghold. You will find refuge within my care. With truth around your waist, with justice as your breastplate, with faith before you as your shield against the power of evil, the armor of our God. Do not be afraid. Do not be concerned. All you ask of me, I will provide in the darkest storm. I am at your side.
As we celebrate the sixth Sunday in Ordinary Time, we will hear more about the sacred scriptures by Deacon Paul Lisko.
In today's Gospel, we hear the beautiful Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount. But these are Luke's Beatitudes. There are only 4 of them, and they are followed by some pretty scary woes. Luke is telling those who are poor, hungry, weeping, hated, excluded, insulted, and denounced that they are blessed. And he's telling those who are not suffering, those who are rich, filled with food, laughing, and treated with respect, that they will suffer. What are we supposed to learn from this? God created all of the wonderful things in this world. Why would he want us to suffer for enjoying his gifts? That can't be right, can it? So what is this all about? Well, it has less to do with material possessions and more to do with the person that possesses them. It really has to do with us and our present situation in society. We need to be open to God and let him into our lives. If we make room for God, we will have room for others also. If we want to love and be loved, then we have to have space at the center of who we are. And then goodness can enter into our hearts. If we say that we care about those who are suffering, do we really mean it? Do we even have room in our heart for those who are hurting? Or are we satisfied with walking right past them, and God forgive us, not even making eye contact? We cannot reach out to others if we are too wrapped up in ourselves. The lesson to learn from today's Beatitudes is this: we are blessed if we do not cram ourselves full, leaving no room for that which really matters. We are blessed if we allow ourselves to have that wonderful empty space that can become a home for God and for others. There is only one being who can give us the bread of life, who can satisfy our deep hunger for love. Blessed are we if we can let go of that cluttering and fly into the arms of the divine lover and become lovers ourselves. For Wineskins, I'm Deacon Paul.
What is more vital to a community than people who are stable in times of instability, or people who have hope in days of despair? Others can rest in the shadow of their strength and find fruit to feed their own hungry hearts. Wineskins is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. It is brought to you by the annual Diocesan Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. I'm your host, Father Jim Korda, wishing you a beautiful week.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I bought her an orchid.
What have I done for my marriage today? I sent my husband a love email.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. But she's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Make a change for the better. Need help? Go to foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
They say America is the land of opportunity, but for some, life isn't so easy. Right now in America, 1 in 6 children lives below the poverty line. That's nearly 13 million children of all races, all across our country. Where do you draw the line and get involved? You can make a difference in more ways than you think. Go to povertyusa.org today, because 1 in 6 children in poverty is one too many. A message from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.